Thanks, Justice Nelson. It's been my experience, having served on this committee for quite some time, and now chair, and my personal experience as a practicing lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, before being elected to Congress, that federal judges have a different temperament. Some of them with a title and a black robe and a lifetime appointment bring out the best in them. They are just extraordinary, and I can think of many in my background. Others, not so much. I think the question of demeanor of a judge in a courtroom is not often talked about because it is so subjective. But each of you have either presided as a judge or been in a courtroom, and I'd like your thoughts on perhaps a lifetime experience, personal experience with a judge that gave you some insight into how a judge can be just and fair and basically make people feel welcome in a courtroom, and perhaps the opposite as well. Judge Calabretta, would you like to start?
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I was fortunate to see up close Judge William Fletcher and, of course, Justice John Paul Stevens. From both of them, I took a great respect for the law. Justice Stevens, in particular, really brought a sense of humility to the bench, and that's something that I value. I've had the opportunity to be a judge for the last almost 4 years, and I can see how important the cases are to the litigants in front of me. And so I strive each and every day to make sure that they feel heard, that they feel respected, and that they feel like someone has listened to them and given them a fair and impartial decision. And that's what I would do as a judge if I were so fortunate to be confirmed.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. When I first began my law career, I had the good fortune of working for an attorney named Charlie Daniels, who later became Chief Justice of the New Mexico Supreme Court. And I remember him telling me one time that a lawsuit is not to be used to embarrass litigants or attorneys. And I really took that to heart. During the course of the litigation, I didn't add parties that didn't need to be added, and I felt he acted that way during his tenure as a Supreme Court Justice. He was kind to everybody who appeared before him. He didn't embarrass anybody, even if they maybe didn't present the correct legal arguments or cite the right case. And I've tried to emulate that during the course of my professional career.
Judge Hopkins?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin. I had the good fortune of working for Judge Norris, and he instilled in me that it was most important to respect the institution of the court. The court will be here. It is our good fortune to be part of it and to be good stewards of it while we are here to take very good care of it. The other thing he instilled was it is so vital that we have our decisions issued timely so that the parties aren't waiting and that they have substantial justice in a very short period of time.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins?
Thank you, Senator Durbin. I have had the good fortune of practicing before virtually every judge in the Northern District of Illinois as a litigant for nearly 15 years. That particular district is full of very smart, thoughtful, demanding judges who require the very best of the litigants who appear before them. And as a result of that experience, I was always able to rise to the challenge by digging in with a lot of hard work and working very hard at all times to meet the expectations not only of the judges before whom I appeared, but also on behalf of, in my role as an advocate, the United States. And so I've been privileged to serve in that role, and I learned tremendously from the individuals who I will hope to one day call colleagues should I be confirmed.
Thanks. Justice Nelson?
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I've had the good fortune to work with a number of wonderful judges and currently sitting with justices that really epitomize taking their role very seriously and making sure that everyone has a full and fair opportunity to be heard. But two people come to mind for me. The first, the late Justice Betty Roberts, who was a trailblazer in her own right, who told me that you always treat everyone, not only before you, but the staff extremely well, because that is important to the administration of justice. And the other person is a retired judge who was my colleague on the Multnomah County Circuit Court, Janice Wilson. She was a person who was living with disabilities, and so she knew how it was feel to be not treated as a human. And she instilled in me that you always took the time to treat everyone well so that they feel like they had an opportunity to be heard. And those are the people that mean a lot to me as I sit on the bench.
So there's a concern, obviously, of bias by a judge. That's understandable. And in this committee, it often displays itself as people look at the background of an individual and say, that judge or that nominee is a former prosecutor for many, many years. Ms. Jenkins, 14, 15 years as a prosecutor. Or Justice Nelson, wait a minute, take a look at that. She was a public defender for many years. Do they come to these cases with a bias? Could they come to a conclusion which is proper by law and do it in a manner that is credible? Tell me about your background, Justice Nelson, and whether that has influenced your decision-making on the bench.
Chair Durbin, in the 16 years that I have served as a state trial court judge and appellate judge, I have sat on over 300 trials, thousands of matters, and hundreds of oral arguments. In each matter, I understand that they're very important. And I approach each case with an open mind and treat everyone fairly and impartially, because to the litigants, their case is the most important case in the world to them. I try to communicate all decisions clearly so that they can be understood. And if I'm so fortunate to be confirmed, I would continue to do that.
Ms. Jenkins, take a look at your background. Clearly an accomplished prosecutor who was given additional responsibilities in the U.S. Attorney's Office to head up the criminal division. Now, we have others who come before us who've spent their whole lives as public defenders. I have some of my colleagues on this panel who will never vote for them to become a judge because of that. They're just assuming there's a prejudice there. Tell us your thoughts on being a judge and whether there's a special sensitivity to charges of bias because of your background.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. I recognize the issues that you just laid out, and I would do my level best every day to put aside any role that I previously had as an advocate and focus only on application of the law to the facts in the case presented before me in order to reach the appropriate determination according to precedent. I would be very cognizant and aware of the fact that my previous experience as a prosecutor could creep in, but I would do everything possible to prevent that. In fact, my time in private practice in the last year or so has given me a fresh opportunity to work as a defense attorney in the private sector, which has given me fresh perspective. And so I appreciate the opportunity to become, if confirmed, a neutral arbiter.
Thank you. Judge Hopkins, when I came to this committee 20 plus years ago, I was assigned to a subcommittee that was chaired by Chuck Grassley. The Republicans were in the majority in the committee, and we had the administrative subcommittee, which had a variety of issues and subjects of jurisdiction. Turned out the number one issue was reforming the bankruptcy code. This goes back a few years, and you probably remember it better than most.
1978.
Yes. And we had our differences, but I certainly developed a friendship and respect for Senator Grassley as we tackled that issue. It turned out that I had more experience with bankruptcy law than any member of the Judiciary Committee by virtue of taking a bankruptcy law course at Georgetown and by being appointed trustee for a gas station in Springfield, Illinois, when it went into bankruptcy. So I had that wealth of experience to lean on as we rewrote the bankruptcy code. You've spent 25 years in the practice, really focusing on the bankruptcy code. Would you like to say a word or two about that before I ask the next question?
Certainly. Thank you, Senator Durbin. Bankruptcy law is often viewed as a specialty. It is one of the most general practice areas that there still is. Under the Butner decision from the United States Supreme Court, we bring in all of the property law that comes from the states. So we can one day apply Illinois law and another day California law. Very sophisticated practice with a very dedicated bar, and my colleagues who sit on the bench are some of the finest minds in the legal community that there are.
You've anticipated my next question, and that was the impact of that experience as you face the possibility, and a probability, let me add, of becoming a district court judge with a practice, or I should say a responsibility that reaches primarily into the criminal field, but also the civil as well. As you anticipate that venture into criminal law, what are your thoughts?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. I have been a bankruptcy judge for 26 years. We apply the federal rules of civil procedure, the rules of evidence, all of those tools I'll take with me as I go into the district court if I'm so fortunate to be confirmed by this body. The criminal practice will test me in the sense that I'll have to reach into my recesses of my skill sets that I've developed over the years to become more familiar with the criminal rules and the law, the substantive law on sentencing under 3553. I am confident in my ability to be able to do that, though.
I have no doubt that you can rise to that challenge. Mr. Garcia, when I listened to my colleagues, Senators Heinrich and Lujan, talk about your background, it's incredible where you have been and what you have done. I hate to pick out one case and ask you to comment on it, but I think it's a topical case, which if we had the full complement in this committee, they'd be asking you about as well. In your capacity as general counsel to New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, who is a friend, you helped draft public health directives related to COVID-19 pandemic and defended the state and challenge in some of these orders. You represented New Mexico in Legacy Church versus Kunkel, in which a New Mexico church challenged in April 2020 order prohibiting mass gatherings without social distancing. Could you tell us more about that case and what the outcome was?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Durbin, and I'm sure the governor appreciates your kind words. She always has very nice things to say about you, too. In my capacity as general counsel, I represented the state and defended the state on numerous challenges to the various restrictions that the Department of Health, our State Department of Health, and the governor implemented in response to the COVID pandemic. The Legacy Church case was early on in the pandemic and dealt with occupancy restrictions at the church. The case, we relied largely on Chief Justice Roberts' concurring opinion in South Bay United, as I think many people did during the nascent stages of the pandemic. That decision was ultimately, the district court found in the state's favor, and the 10th Circuit affirmed that decision. Of course, it was prior to the Supreme Court's holding in the Archdiocese case and Tandon, so we didn't have the benefit of the court's opinion in those cases when we litigated the Legacy Church case.
And basically now, if asked to rule on a case involving that, what would guide your ruling?
Certainly those two decisions, Chair Durbin, they have, I think, established a pretty clear framework about analyzing those kinds of issues. I'm hopeful that we never have to analyze those kinds of issues again and deal with the pandemic, but if faced with that, I would certainly rely and follow faithfully all Supreme Court's precedent and 10th Circuit Court precedent.
Thank you for that. Judge Calabretta, I can't miss the opportunity to ask you about Justice John Paul Stevens, a man I knew casually and respected greatly, and I wondered what impact he had on your life.
Thank you, Senator. I have just tremendous respect for Justice Stevens. I don't think I've ever met someone as humble and kind, but who knew the law better than anyone, and I'm certainly biased in saying that. He had a really great respect for the facts of each case, which I found somewhat surprising as a Supreme Court justice. But he could tell you the facts of a case that had been decided 20 years ago. And he really imparted to me the importance of understanding the facts, really digging in deeply to the law. And that's something that I have tried to do throughout my career, and including as a judge.
So we didn't always agree, at least I didn't agree with all of his opinions, but I certainly respected him for the reasons that you mentioned. There was one case in particular, I wondered if you were clerking at the time on the flag burning case.
No, Senator, that was before my time.
Was there any reference to it while you were clerking?
Certainly, I think he talked about it. He felt very strongly, as he did in all his decisions, that he had gotten it right. But I know that he had a deep sense of patriotism from his time in military service, which I have no doubt influenced his thinking on that case.
I also respected his personal history with baseball in Chicago, which I won't go into at this point. And someone was very careful to note that a member of the family worked for a Chicago baseball club, but they didn't mention it. Thank you for that, because it would automatically evoke a reaction from the other team and their fans for that regard. So as you probably heard before, there'll be an opportunity for members to send written questions based on what we went through this morning and their own inquiries, and we hope that they'll send them all by October 19th, and you'll respond as quickly as possible. I thank your families and friends for joining us this morning. I will just tell you in general terms, I've asked my staff when it is possible, note the word possible, that your nominations would reach the calendar on the floor, and I believe that's the first part of December. There is a elaborate judicial, I shouldn't say elaborate procedural process here in terms of bringing members before the committee, waiting another week, and then considering them. So I wish you all well. I thank you for being here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you and your families, and wish you the best in your pursuit of this nomination. At this point, the Senate Judiciary Committee will stand adjourned.